Storms rampaged in the Philippines, causing damage to Davao City, affecting 10,000 families. Tzu Chi Kelantan branch has mobilized 100 volunteers for a sutra adaptation performance.
I'm Sean Scanlon. This is DAI Headlines. Major storms rampaged in southern Philippines on August 27th. This caused heavy damage to Davao City, the major harbor and business center of the area. Storms affected some 10,000 families and several thousand buildings. Tzu Chi started a Work for Cash program inviting 1,000 people to clean up their towns.
As far as you can see, the mud is everywhere, even in houses. Storm fell in Davao in the southern Philippines and caused flooding. The flooding affected 10,000 families, with Tolomon in the downstream being the hardest hit area. Over 6,000 families are affected.
The floods in the low-lying areas were over 1 floor deep. In higher areas, the floods were 2 meters deep.
The evacuation orders came at 4 a.m. The residents were ignorant of their environment, thus compounding the disaster.
Many of my neighbors escaped to the second floors or even the roofs from the floods.
Most people thought it wouldn't rain too long and the rain wouldn't become stronger as it rained, so they ignored the evacuation orders. When the floods had come, it was already too late to leave.
Tzu Chi volunteers walk into mud to understand the plight. The closer the houses to the river, the more damage they have. After the floods have receded, there is a mix of strange smells in the air, and the mud has become more difficult to be cleared away. Tzu Chi started a cash forward program for 1,000 affected residents by paying every person around $19 a day. It is equal to twice their daily salaries, so the money can support them for a while and also encourage them to rebuild their homes.
Volunteers from Malawi, Zambia, Namibia, Eswatini, and Malaysia arrived in Durban, South Africa. They came for a 5-day learning camp, which was held in late July. Volunteers used activities and songs to pass on the love and compassion to the next generation.
They express gratitude in 4 languages. Tzu Chi volunteers from Malawi, Zambia, and Namibia travel over 2,000 kilometers one way and arrive in Durban, South Africa 3 days later. These volunteers came to visit the impoverished and learn how to love people.
This red envelope of blessing and wisdom comes from the Master. When you pray, you can hold it in your hand. When you sleep, you can put it by your bed.
This small gift, we know that it's not enough for you, but we just come to share our love, that we are together as one family.
With the Dharma in one's heart, one can uphold the vow. In this tiny room, the volunteers do not stop sharing, even when the power goes out.
We raised money ourselves to buy rice and simple food for the orphans.
We are together because of Tzu Chi. If there is no Tzu Chi, we have never been here. Thank you, Tzu Chi, for teaching us how to do good deeds.
You came to learn, not to play. You are the future executives.
We're not here for funny.
Tzu Chi teach us we came to learn, and it's a valuable experience.
We have been taught.
Thank you. I'm Hasha's grandma, right?
Volunteers from Eswatini and Malaysia also gather to learn and visit the impoverished.
Their lives don't want to walk.
He can't walk because of diabetes and his hand is numb. Take care, be strong.
This grandma suffers from stroke and is bedridden. She is touched after the bath.
Good one. Hey, I'm so happy.
Your kids have returned. Thank you, Lord, for bringing you here. This is probably my last time to see you.
And the last time. Second to last time to see you.
In the past 4 months, Tzu Chi Kelantan branch has mobilized more than 100 volunteers to prepare for a sutra adaptation performance. Some professionals and people of other religions were invited to join, ultimately leading to 2 successful performances.
It is quite difficult for Tzu Chi to promote filial piety through performing the sutra adaptation on stage in Kelantan, Malaysia. With few Chinese there, Tzu Chi volunteers organized the events through their own funds. The director of Kelantan National Department for Culture and Arts was deeply touched and took initiative to offer the venue free of charge.
When I came to liaise with him, I introduced Tzu Chi to him, like what we are doing in Kelantan. He was so touched by what I said, he asked me to write a letter to him, and then he could provide free rental.
When I understand the missions of Tzu Chi, I'm very willing to cooperate with them and try to contribute my little part in this Dharma assembly. Filial piety is needed to be passed down in the community, not only to our parents, but also to the whole country, to our friends like you as well as to the public.
A reporter of Xinzhou Daily, Hong Wei-chung, has good affinity with Tzu Chi volunteers because of having many interviews on Tzu Chi activities before. In the Dharma assembly, he offered to serve as the stage director.
The society will become better if there are more organizations like Tzu Chi. Sometimes we feel that we already done a lot, but when we compare our contributions with theirs, ours is not worth mentioning.
Having known a wide range of people, he has recommended a professional to be the technical director of the assembly.
I didn't have this intention before, plus I am a Christian. After all, Tzu Chi is a Buddhist organization. But I can understand their intention to get more people involved in the assembly, no matter whether they are sitting at the auditorium or performing on the stage. I quite admire Tzu Chi for holding such a successful assembly, which was not too long or too short. This impressed me a lot.
The persistence and perseverance of the Tzu Chi people in Kelantan impressed the outsiders to come to help the assembly, spreading its spirits out from the stage.
Volunteers in Tzu Chi Kelantan branch in Malaysia worked hard to gather people to perform the musical adaptation of the Sutra of Filial Piety. Though the process was difficult, they hope to inspire the audiences to be grateful and cherish the love of their parents.
This time the Kelantan branch needs to host the ceremony ourselves. There are many details we don't understand and we need to get familiar with it. It's certainly hard. The population in Kelantan isn't much and the Chinese community is small. We originally want to reach 340 people, but we can only find 290. So we must try our best to reach out to people outside the branch to help shoulder the ceremony.
2019年7月吉祥孝亲祈福会正式开始。
We emphasize filial piety. We want to inspire filial acts in everyone so that children can be considerate of parents' love.
We thought of going into the campus and to promote doing good deeds and filial piety to parents and children. We have 3 schools participating in the interpretation of the sutra adaptation, and another part was performed by parents. We want to go into communities so that more people can join the ceremony.
所以我们想要走入社区，让也社区的人一起来跟我们参与我们这个法会。
一双情，一双看了你。
These students have many activities, so every time we went to the campus to rehearse, they can't all come together. It wasn't until mid-July after they finished their exams. We got to rehearse intensively at night. They are all very good children, so they are very cooperative. All of the goodness came from showing filial piety. When they understand filial piety, they will know to practice good deeds. Let's create a clean and fresh society together. Thank you.
孩子们在这个演绎的过程中有所体会跟。
I'm content that these children have learned something and grown during the performance. It's not an easy path for Tzu Chi to recruit in Kelantan, where the Chinese community is small. However, we hope that through this ceremony, we can purify hearts and invite more people to understand Tzu Chi. Hopefully, we can inspire compassion in more people's hearts and join us to do good deeds.
In Malaysia, shadow puppetry is one of Kelantan's traditional arts. There's a Chinese shadow puppetry master, Mr. Ao Hock Sung, who was invited to perform shadow puppetry in Tzu Chi's sutra adaptation performance. He remarked that he learned about the Buddha's lifestyle through experience and is happy to learn to do good deeds and respect other people. Many media professionals and government officials wonder why a Chinese person like me would be interested in Malay culture. My name is Ao Hock Sung, and I am from Kelantan. I became interested in shadow puppetry since I was 9 years old. I've been playing with shadow puppets for 42 years. I used to perform in the countryside often. Later, I was invited to perform overseas. I performed at the National Cultural Heritage Center and won the Cultural Heritage Award. Shadow puppetry originated in India. It was called Malay play in Johor. A Kelantan man watched the performance and brought it to Kelantan. It was then called shadow puppetry. The puppets are made with animal skins. Many of the stories of shadow puppetry are related to the Malay imperial families. There are also many historical legends and modern stories. It is popular among the young people and seniors. Besides watching the performance, one can also learn about the morals behind the stories.
有请我国文化遗产传承人皮影戏大师杨福成先生，透过皮影戏为我们述说累世亲情之因缘。Seorang Buddha berjumpa longgokan tulang manusia.
It is, after all, the culture of Kelantan. We try to incorporate the culture of Kelantan into our Buddhist stories, which is a new challenge for us.
This performance is different from those in the past. This time we're telling religious stories, teaching people what precepts are and what karma is. Therefore, we cannot make the props with animal skins. If we used animal skins, we would be killing lives. So we used plastic paper to make the puppets because plastic papers are not animals.
It was not easy to find a substitute for the animal skin. In the end, we found that PVC could be a substitute. Then, we found the soldering paper which was used to glue on glass and put them on the PVC, so they would look like animal skin. We hope that it could pass on our Kelantan traditional culture. Since the shadow puppetry in Kelantan is on a decline, we hope that more people will get to know shadow puppetry through this Dharma assembly.
Actually, I know very little about the Buddha. Through the shadow puppetry performance, I was able to learn about the Buddha's lifestyle. We must do good deeds and respect other people. I'm also very happy because I was able to understand the story and learn something.
Looking back upon the 9/21 earthquake, Taiwan has learned a lot from the arrival of international search and rescue teams. Taiwan learned the importance of horizontal integration for major disasters such as typhoons and earthquakes. And the fire department also set up a special search and rescue team, boosting the ability to respond to disasters.
The Ning'an No. 5 exercise, known as the largest disaster drill in the past years, mobilized more than 2,200 people. The Tokyo Fire Department, the Kanagawa Safety and Disaster Prevention Bureau, and several experts from the Seoul Fire Disaster Headquarters also attended the event, participating in an important international exchange.
We also work with some NGOs and police for these disaster drills. This kind of horizontal communication is very important. I feel very honored to participate in this New Taipei City exercise.
Every country has a set of disaster response measures. The key cooperation between Taiwan and international rescue units occurred during the 9/21 earthquake in 1999.
At that time, we did not have a search and rescue unit in Taiwan. There was no so-called internationally certified search and rescue unit.
After the earthquake, 20 countries and 38 international search and rescue teams assisted in disaster relief and taught Taiwan valuable knowledge. The most special was the use of search and rescue dogs and the use of life detectors.
During that year, we only had one life detector, and it belonged to the manufacturer. At that time, we thought that would be able to put out a fire with it.
Through these photographs, we can see search and rescue team using life detectors to find people trapped in the rubble. If the distance is close enough, the detector can even hear the heartbeat of a trapped person. 20 years later, this disaster relief tool is almost everywhere in Taiwan's county and city fire stations. In addition, the 9/21 International Disaster Relief Experience also allowed the fire department to set up a special search and rescue team in June 2002.
The fire department's special search and rescue team performed a total of 6 international humanitarian relief efforts. I only participated in one, which was the 2011 earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Every task is a tug of war between life and death, with search and rescue teams rushing to find survivors. If you want to reduce accidents, one has to think carefully about the construction and putting things up to earthquake tests.
In fact, if general housing is not good enough to resist earthquakes, it is better to do reinforcements. Just like if the capacity of the original container is very low, then we will add some vertical support to enlarge the size of the column and add some infill walls. In fact, some of these things can increase the capacity of this container.
Older houses are generally incapable of resisting earthquakes, and they lack complete safety facilities. Once a disaster occurs, people's lives and property face a great threat. Public buildings must not collapse because in times of disasters, they must become command and dispatch centers as well as shelters. After the 9/21 earthquake, the government began to promote the Building Earthquake Resistance Assessment and Reinforcement Plan. By 2018, there were more than 28,700 public buildings included, with only 60% of them completed. Among them, the Ministry of Education had the most large-scale projects, as the 9/21 earthquake led 293 primary and secondary schools to totally or partially collapse. In 2000, the school's earthquake-resistant capacity improvement project was implemented. Hualien's National Donghua University has an experimental primary school located in the Xiyuan building, which has a history of more than 50 years. It's the only remaining old building on campus, and many alumni remember it. However, the length of the building, plus the beam and columns being too thin, must be strengthened to continue to protect the students.
The seismic resistance in both the parallel and vertical corridor is not very good, so we use pillars in the front, back, left, and right to stop earthquake movement in this direction or the other direction. This can be an effective improvement.
After the completion of this year, the earthquake that struck in April tested our after-earthquake reinforcement project. During our inspection, the school building had no problem. We looked over the appearance of the entire building, and they did not see any problems. Increasing the structure and security is not easy because it requires a lot of money. County and city governments have limited financial resources, coupled with the required paperwork, leads to serious delays in implementing this project.
所以真正能全面完成要15年。
So it's really 15 years to complete care for 26,000 school buildings. But you see, there are millions of schools in Taiwan. So it's really necessary to be determined and persevered, as it may take 40 years of work.
可能都是以40年这种为单位。
Is Taiwan prepared enough to fight against natural disasters? Japan and Taiwan are also located on the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Rim with frequent earthquakes. In order to improve the National Disaster Prevention and Division System, in 1961, Japan formulated the Basic Law for Disaster Countermeasures to form a complete system of disaster prevention regulations. Learned from the past strong earthquakes as trauma gave way to rebirth.
The earthquake resistance rate in Japan is already 90%. They have achieved this before the Olympics, so the earthquake resistance rate is almost complete. This includes public and private buildings.
Disasters cannot be forgotten, and disaster prevention and resilience are all very important as we look forward to the future. What are we prepared for, and what will come is something that is vitally important to all of our lives.
In Kaohsiung, a sporting event for the physically and mentally challenged was held, helping them develop the habit of exercise. We'll leave you with this. Goodbye.